Hello everyone, it's Karen at the Cool Tools Studio. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a beginner-friendly pendant using Phoenix Torch Fireable Clay. This tutorial is beginner-friendly and would make a perfect first project. I'll be walking you through this piece from start to finish, covering construction, greenware refinement, firing, applying a patina, and polishing. This sweet little pendant ends up using slightly less than 3 grams of clay, and with the potential to personalize it with different letters is perfect for gifts and retail as well. Here's what you need for the clay working portion of this project. A clay board, some sanding pads, a finishing touches mold, today I'm working with the alphabet number 7, a texture tile, some tough cards, a wonder roller, and cool slip, clay thickness rolling frames, Phoenix Torch Fireable Clay, and a circle template, the magenta precision hole punch, a hand drill, an ultra clay pick, a small brush, a palette knife, and a clay shaper. You also need a dish for water and a dust mask. Phoenix Torch Fireable Clay produces a very fine dust when sanded, and it's recommended that you wear a mask when sanding your pieces. This pendant is built up in 3 layers, and we're going to start off with the top layer here and make that little A. To make the A, I've got this finishing touches mold, and these are just a really great tool for making precise shapes, including letters. And I've got some of my Phoenix clay here, kind of just loaded up on a palette knife. And I'm going to be pressing down in and then scraping across to get my shape. Got some excess there. And just like that, I've got a nice little A that I can apply. So I'm going to take this off and set it aside to dry a little bit. And we're going to move on by making the back portion of our pendant. So for this back plate on my pendant, I'm going to be doing something that's called texturing down, where I'm going to be rolling my clay to 1 thickness to start, and then I'll be taking that sheet of clay and putting it on top of my texture with a lower thickness to get the finished desired size. So we're starting off with 4 cards thickness here, but I'm going to be prepping my work surface with some cool slip. And just 1 spray of that is enough for both my work surface and my roller. So I'm bringing my 4 cards thickness frame onto my work surface here. And these are just tools that are designed to make sure that you're rolling your clay evenly. It's kind of difficult if I were to just take this clay, set it on a work surface, and try to roll it evenly. So these are a great little tool for making sure your sheets are of even thickness. So I'm picking this up, and I'm bringing in my texture at this point. And I really like this texture. There's a lot of areas of interest, and I'm interested in this kind of area with some little like rosettes and maybe some daisies. So I'm going to apply some cool slip to the texture as well. And then since I had initially rolled it to 4, I'm bumping down to 3. This isn't a very deep texture. If it did have a big change in depth to it, you might want to jump up from 5 to 3, but for the shallower texture, just 1 card's difference is going to give me enough contrast and depth. So I'm setting it down there, and then when you're rolling on texture, you just want to do 1 single roll. If you go back and forth, you might get something that's called ghosting, and that's where the clay will shift in the middle of your roll, and you'll get kind of this doubled or shadowed effect on your pattern or texture. So I'm starting on the back here and just pushing forward and getting 1 roll there. And now we're going to cut out the shape. So I've got my circle template here, and I always like to cut on a tough card. I'm not pushing down and dragging when I cut, but it is a sharp little point on this tip here, and it will scratch your clay board. And then any other clay that you roll on top of the clay board could get these kind of lines from the scratches on your work surface. So it's just a good practice to cut on a tough card. I'm working with the 4th in from the left here. It's marked with number 18. And I just kind of shop around and see what I like best. I think that'll look really nice. So then again, when you're cutting, you don't have to push hard. You're just dragging along the edge here. And this Phoenix clay cuts really nicely. without much drag. So there's that back plate. I'm going to set this off to the side and roll out some clay to 2 cards thickness to make the little circle to put the A on top of. So I'm bringing in my 2 cards thickness, and there's still plenty of cool slip from earlier. And then I'm again placing on my tough card to cut, and I've got this precision hole punch, and I like using these especially for small shapes because you don't end up getting an edge that you have to refine at all. It's just a really clean cut. And if they ever do stick in there, you can just gently blow through the back and get your shape. I'm going to take this extra clay and I'm going to put it in a clay hydrator to keep it nice and moist for my next project. And then Phoenix clay builds really well wet to wet. And with some clays, I let them dry before I build because they're softer, and in picking them up and kind of fussing with them, you can damage the texture. But Phoenix clay is super sturdy, so I'm not really worried about doing that. So Phoenix clay is an excellent candidate for building wet to wet, which is perfect because then you don't have to wait for it to dry and then join and then wait for it to dry again. So I'm just adding some water to the middle here, just kind of working it in a little bit, and then I'm picking up a piece that's going to be going on top here, applying some water to the back of it. Again, just kind of massaging it, working it in, and then I'm going to flip it and set it. Whoops. There we go. And then use my brush to kind of nudge it into its final positioning. And again, usually I'd be kind of worried about doing this with a softer clay, but since Phoenix is firm and kind of sturdy, I'm not damaging this texture along this edge by nudging it and applying some water to it. And then I'm just going to go around the edge and add a little more water to really solidify that. And then at this point, I'm going to go check to see if my letter is dry, because we can apply that to the top there as well. And that does look good to go. So when I just do a few letters, or one at a time, I kind of just push my tweezer underneath, whoop, and just pop it up. And then just like before, I'm going to dampen the surface that I'm going to be joining to. And then for the back of my A, I'm going to put some water on my tough card to dip it in, because it's kind of hard to hold the letter and use a brush to apply water to it. So I just pick up and bring it over here. I'm going to kind of nudge it around a little bit until I'm happy with the positioning. And then I like to just use the back of my tweezers, it's got a nice flat face on it, to press down and apply a little bit of pressure at this point. You don't want to push too hard because since I am building on top of soft clay, it could kind of sink down in, but you're just very gently kind of applying a little bit of pressure to encourage a nice strong join here. All right, so at this point, I'm going to take this off to a mug warmer, a dehydrator, or leave it out to dry. And once it's dry, we can work on refining it. So while that one dries, since I already had this guy prepped and ready to go to kind of reference as we were working, I'm just going to go ahead and move on by refining and drilling into this piece. So I'm going to start off by drilling the hole that I'm going to put a jump ring through. And when Phoenix clay dries, it's very sturdy. And that can make it kind of difficult to dive right in and drill with a larger drill bit. So depending on the size of hole that you're drilling, it might be helpful to start off with a smaller drill bit and then work your way up to a larger drill bit. Kind of like making a pilot hole before you drill a larger hole. So I'm just kind of making sure that my A is facing the direction I want it to. It'd be kind of silly to drill here and then realize, oop, I wasn't paying attention. So you want to make sure that you have it oriented how you'd like it to hang. And then I usually kind of wiggle around the drill bit to make a kind of mark, and then take a step back, look at it again. Yep, I think that's going to be good. And with these hand drills, you're drilling straight down with the downward pressure as you twist. And notice I'm again drilling on top of a tough card to protect my work surface and my clay board. And we're almost through. And when you are drilling from a smaller hole to a larger hole, you want to make sure you give yourself enough clearance on this edge here that you're not right up on it and then you're going to blow through this wall when you move up in size. So now I'm moving up to a larger drill bit, and for these hand drills you just twist this top here and it opens and closes that chuck. So you can put the drill bit in and then twist to close. So again, just a gentle downward pressure with a twist. I think I'm through. Kind of flip it back to make sure. Yep. So now at this point I'm ready to do some refinement. So there's two methods of refinement that I'm going to be covering today. And the first of which is going to be sanding using these 3M sanding pads. I'm going to be working with superfine and then moving on to ultrafine and microfine. As I said at the beginning of the video, when you are sanding, this Phoenix clay produces a very fine dust, so you want to protect yourself by wearing a dust mask. Depending on how much refinement you need to do, like this little edge here and this little edge here, there's something I need to remove, so I'm going to use the superfine for that, but I really won't have to spend much time with the superfine sanding pad because I'm not really having to alter the shape or anything, I'm just cleaning up this edge. And this Phoenix is super sturdy when dry, but it's just a good practice to always hold your pieces close to the edge. I'm not wanting to hold all the way over here and then sand. That's just not very stable. So when you're using sanding pads for refinement, you want to hold close to the edge and then follow that edge, as opposed to dragging up and down. Phoenix is sturdy, but if your piece was thin, or if you had a more flexible clay, you could potentially kind of drag it up with your sanding pad when you're sanding that way and run a little bit more of a risk of breaking. So follow your edges when you sand. And I'm going to move on from the superfine to ultrafine. There's a little bit of a lip here I'm going to take down. So since I'm taking off the top face here, I'm supporting below. And you would just work your way from that to finally microfine. So say you're like, I don't really want to wear a mask. This dust is really fine. It's a little messy for me. Phoenix clay is also an excellent candidate for wet refinement. And for that, I just have this clay shaper. I've got the round cup shape because I like this kind of flat face here. And for that, you're just going to dampen the tip here, and a little bit of moisture goes a really long way. So I'm going to kind of actually remove some of it. And for wet refinement, you work in a circular motion. And what you're doing here is you're moistening the clay a little bit, and you're moving little silver particles from the high areas into any low areas that there may be. And smoothing out that surface, just like you would if you were to be sanding it. When you're happy with your piece, you want to ensure that it is completely dry before you fire it. Before we dive right in and fire this piece, let's take a moment to talk about some safety procedures and your firing environment. You want to make sure that you're firing in a fireproof, safe area. So here I've got a ceramic fiber kiln shelf, and that's what I'm placing my piece directly on to fire. But I wouldn't want to just set this on like a wooden surface or something. You could set it on bricks, fireproof tiles. I here have an annealing pan filled with pumice. And I really like this because it's just a nice, safe environment that I know I can hit any of this with a torch by accident and it's going to be okay. We're going to be working with a butane torch today, but before we even think about lighting it up, we're going to make sure any long hair is pulled back, that we don't have any loose sleeves. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses, And you want to make sure you're firing in a very well ventilated area. You can either fire outdoors or you can work with something called a fume extractor. All right, so we're going to be firing this piece and we're going to be using color to indicate target temperature. So I'm going to heat my piece with the butane torch until it's glowing a kind of peachy color, and we're going to lower the light so you can see that better. But once it hits that temperature, that's when you're going to start your timer. Since this is a smaller piece, I'm going to be firing it for 4 minutes. So I have a Stingray Blazer torch here, and to start it up, you're going to switch up the lock, and then this adjusts the amount of fuel. I'm going to bring it 3/4 of the way up and then push this back button to ignite. So for this torch, I usually keep my heat about 2 to 3 inches or so away from the piece itself. And you want to make sure that you're always keeping your flame moving. If you hesitate and hold your heat on one part of your piece for too long, you run the risk of burning it. So at this point you see a little bit of smoke, a little fume. That's just my binder burning away. It's normal for there to be some flame and some smoke. So there's all that binder burning away. And it's not quite glowing yet. We're still waiting on that kind of peachy, and there it is. It's kind of between an orange and a peach. And at this point, you're going to go ahead and start the timing of your piece. So I'm going to keep my torch moving at all times to avoid overheating any areas, and just try to maintain this color for 4 minutes. All right, so we're sneaking up on 4 minutes here. And at this point, 4 minutes have been achieved. I'm going to turn off the gas and then lock my torch and set it off to the side. At this point, you can either just leave this to air cool. Since it doesn't have any stones or anything that's going to break from thermal shock, I can go ahead and quench this piece so I can finish it immediately. And to do so, I'm just picking it up with tweezers and taking it over to a dish of water and quenching it. So at this point, it's kind of hard to see the floral texture, and the letter doesn't stand out as much as I would like it to. So I'm going to add a patina, and that's going to darken the low areas and help add depth to my piece and really help things stand out. I'm going to be using Cool Tools patina gel. This is just warm off the tap. It works a little bit quicker when it's warmed, but you want to make sure you do not make it boiling, because at that point it produces fumes, and we want to avoid that. So just a bit there. I'm going to be using some copper tongs to stir it about. And that looks a little light. I might have to add more, but you can always kind of dip and check. And what I do like about this method of patinaing is you can kind of go slow with it. I'm going to add a little bit more, but you can really build color this way. You can kind of be like, ooh, I like this where it's at, and stop the process. So you can see it's kind of starting to pick up a gray tone. When you've achieved your desired darkness, you can just rinse it off in water to stop the patination process. So now to really let the pattern show, we're going to remove the patina from the high areas on this pendant. And I have a sanding block here, and I'm just kind of pushing it across this face here. And you can already see how it's removing the patina from the high areas and letting the pattern really stand out. I'm going to kind of do the same treatment to this A on the top here. Make it really pop. And remove a little bit of patina from this disc as well. And this just really, again, kind of helps all the depth and layering that you did in this pendant stand out. It helps each element kind of pop. And at this point, I'm ready to polish. For just small single pieces like this, one of my favorite polishing tools are these flash bright shiners. They have two sides, and you start off with the colored side. It's got a little bit of a texture to it. And you're just going to buff your piece, just like we were before. You can see it's kind of already getting a little bit brighter, and this is on itself like just a really nice kind of satin finish. If you like the look of that, you can definitely just leave it at that. But I'm going to bring it up to a little bit of a higher shine. So at this point, you're going to flip it over and work with the white face. And you're able to achieve a really nice shiny finish by just using this simple block tool. If you're doing lots and lots of pieces, it would be great to invest in something like a tumbler, but if you're just getting started and just doing a few pieces at a time, there's something really satisfying and nice about bringing your pieces up to a polish by hand. So to wrap this video up, I'm going to cover how to hang your finished pendant. And I just have a little jump ring here and some chain nose pliers. And when you go to open your jump rings, you're going to find the opening and put one plier on one side, another plier on the other side, and you're going to, instead of pulling out and distorting the shape of that circle, you're going to open it by kind of dragging them past each other. So now the jump ring is open, but you still have a nice circular shape. So then you're going to place your pendant on the jump ring, and then whatever chain cord you would like, you're also going to place into the jump ring. And now it's time to close. So just like before, I'm grabbing on either side of the opening. And now I'm going to close the jump ring. So now you've got your very first metal clay necklace. I hope this video shows just how approachable precious metal clay can be, especially if you're working with a torch fireable clay like Phoenix. I hope you feel like you can give your own pendant a go. Thanks for watching.